Hi, my name's Tony Ridley, and once again welcome back to another crisis management and leadership education tutorial. In this section we're talking about the roles and responsibilities of the crisis management team members or representative departments. Again, with the precautionary tale that this is not a geographical process, it's not proximity, it's not physical based. That is, that the team are not sitting around a round table deliberating. There is technology issues, there's divergence, they could be around the world, they could be a voice on a television, they could be an email process back and forth. So again, it's about dealing with the complexities and being prepared for that, but ensuring that individuals are not limiting their breadth and understanding of crisis management teams to those physically present. We've spoken about the 6 to 8 representative elements of an ideal crisis management team and function structure, from chief executives to human resources, and in previous sessions we've spoken about those particular roles and responsibilities. What we're going to be talking about now is finance, financial oversight, financial representation. Is certainly critical to all business decision-making processes, but it certainly should be reflected within the representative council or advisory group for crisis management teams. Now, in my experience, having done a lot of simulations and a lot of corporate training and a lot of real-life events, whilst finance is critical to the process, they're often poorly prepared, poorly represented, and poorly participative when it comes to these types of roles and responsibilities. So I single it out as an Achilles heel for many organisations, but I'm going to go into more details as to what that representative council or advice should look like. Remembering it, depending on the size of the organisation, departments, it could be a trained financial accounting representative, or it could be a general manager who's simply representing the oversight of the financial elements of the business as it relates to this crisis. But first of all, they should be developing financial assistance guidelines. Now, this may seem irrelevant to a crisis process. However, crisis management plans, business continuity, business resilience, whatever the definitions or processes within the organisations, finance plays a key consideration, not only through the value of an asset, but the utility that it derives. Because it forms an essential part of the risk quotient or the risk assessment. What that means is that the dollar value spent on the asset, how much it generates or what it's worth to the organisation. Remember, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and vice versa. And then the appropriate risk-based decisions. So, for example, if we've got a set of circumstances where we've got $1 million piece of equipment or $1 million business unit, that's at risk financially, so there's insurance, there's economic processes, but if we expand our understanding of the conditions, that means that $1 million business unit will potentially be unavailable for a 3 to 6 month period. It generates $50 million worth of revenue in that period. We can start to now have a much better sense that we're simply not restricted to $1 million risk consideration. We're talking about tens of $1 million risk consideration. So I use that as a general example, not only for the non-financial representatives, but also the financial representatives, because time and time again what we see is a lot of individuals who focus purely on the P&L, the profit and loss, and they're looking at the financial numbers saying, well, it's worth this, and this is our financial consideration, without contextualizing it and looking at it with all of the representative elements. So this is why it's important that not only that individual but the group works together to flesh out all of those particular details if it's not identified in the plan already, or as it relates to a particular set of circumstances in this crisis. So again, developing the financial assistance guidelines is a critical component of a crisis management plan, but it's often either too hard, overlooked, or sits somewhere else in the organisation. Whoever helped develop those guidelines and is intimately aware of the reasons behind it is the person that needs to be part of this council, because there was a lot of considerations along the way that it was inclusive and exclusive. You don't want to cover old ground. That individual or that appointed council or collective group needs to be involved in that process. They need to be responsible and authorised to help shape what the financial limitations, freedom of action and constraints are as they sit within this circumstance. Do you have a budget of X? Are these funds available? Will they take X amount of time? In this particular circumstances or in this business cycle, we've got cash flow issues, we've got work in progress. all of those things that they need to be able to contextualize for the decision makers. You don't want to get to a point where operations and executive management have made a whole bunch of decisions and evaluations based on the facts available to then have them rebutted because finance said, well, we simply don't have the capital available for that, or this is not possible for these reasons. Again, it needs to be part of the overall planning process on a real-time basis, not only in the development, maintenance and refinement of any existing plans, but as it relates to the crisis or the circumstances as they evolve. And overall, they need to provide, without going into too much nitty-gritty or nuts and bolts of the process, is how financial assistance will be provided. So is this access to cash? Is this a credit? Is this a term deposit, a line of credit? Is it variables in terms of what does that, because this will have an impact on decision-making processes. For example, if you have a vendor and this vendor requires cash in advance and you don't have cash and they don't take credit card, all of these sorts of things, or they're in an evolving economy, or it's the first time you've used them, and all these sorts of things. Again, you don't want this decision-making constraints, presented at the last minute or frustrate the process when they were either avoidable, foreseeable, or other contingents were available. So it's paramount that they represent that element as well. In terms of the authority as well, up to what point do they have decisions to make? And they need to make this very clear. If they've only got procurement's allowance or authority up to $10,000 or $500,000 or $1 million, then you need to contextualise whether that person or that department representing you from the outset is the right authority. Because you don't want to get to a circumstance where you've expended a whole lot of time, labour and energy to get to a decision point, only to find that the individual doesn't have the authority and someone else needs to be consulted and you've got to spend another hour or two bringing them up to speed. Again, this is where the crisis team needs to be, the hired heads, not the hired hands. And they also need to be able to advise on the financial risks as it relates to business continuity. And these could be complex issues between liquidity to shareholder value to working capital to government statutes or compliance and regulatory bodies and a whole bunch of other things that simply is either unknown or forgotten within the rest of the organisation. And this is why, from my original point, I find it both frustrating and surprising that finance is not more engaged in these processes, because at the end of the day, even if you're a charity, there are financial decisions being made throughout the course of any given crisis. So they should be intimately prepared and educated and participative and all of these other aspects. It's not a case of, they'll just sit down in their office and do email and come up when we need them, or they'll be on the phone, which, as a crisis management plan, that may be part of the crisis process, but they do need to be far more engaged and informed and not distracted and not above the whole process. Now, I'm not saying that from a point of animosity. I'm just reflecting across the 80 to 90% of the audiences that I've engaged, being thousands of people, and finance and financial representatives do stand out as the indicative group that are either far less engaged or prepared or understanding of their roles and responsibilities when it comes to these types of scenarios. So once again, that concludes this session. Once again, thanks very much for joining us in the Crisis Leadership and Management Education Tutorials. For further information on this subject and more videos on the subject, please go to www.crisismanagement.tony-ridley.com. Once again, thanks. Goodbye.